Winter in the city as we limber up for the holidays is always a balancing act of sorts. Can we steal a visit to a gallery and make sure you see a sumptuous opera whilst also attending cocktails, soirees and shindigs? Can you stay warm, chic and healthy as the mercury drops and the diary fills up? This episode of Confect Corner muses on the cultural obstacle course the festive period presents us, but also the promise of winter sun and an escape from the cold. We'll drop into London's Tate Modern, where Italian fashion powerhouse Gucci have backed an exhibition called Electric Dreams, Art and Technology Before the Internet. We'll talk Alpine fashion with the Norwegian ski team, and we'll escape to the Med to meet Turkish singer Melike Sahin and hear an audio essay on Chiara Romella's seaside surfing adventure in Morocco. This is Confect Corner, and I'm your host, Sophie Grove.
It really was a way to reclaim it from its destructive and utilitarian purposes, and a way for artists and creatives in general to have a seat at the table.
My main inspiration is not coming from music, I guess it's from literature. Sometimes when I read, like let's say a novel, I see a word and that word inspires me and I start to write a new song, including that beautiful word.
It's easier to lean into that feeling when you're travelling on your own. Solitude affords us the privilege of building the reality we want to perceive, undisturbed by external reminders of everyday life.
Welcome to Confect Corner. I'm your host, Sophie Grove, here in London. I'm joined, as ever, by Julian Tobias here in our studio and by our style director, Marcella Palick, in Zurich. Hello to you both.
Hello, Sophie. Nice to be across the table from you again.
Hello, London.
Hello. Hi,
Hello,
Marcella.
London. Hi.
From snowy Zurich.
Not anymore. From sunny.
Sunny, cold.
Sunny Zurich. Sunny and crisp cold.
Well, as listeners will know, we like to start the show with a little show and tell. Marcella, let's begin with you this month. What do you have for us?
I'm just back from a couple of days in balmy, sunny Marrakesh, and there I went for dinner in the 2 years ago opened restaurant Sabi Sabi in Gelis, the modern neighborhood of the old Medina of Marrakesh. It was amazing. The warm lit, very, very chic interior is all about wood, and tiles and leather in warm beige and desert tones, exactly what I love. And it's designed by Studio Co, the architects of the nearby Yves Saint Laurent Museum. The special thing is that Sabi Sabi is led by women only. From the chief to the director, the whole crew is women only, young women only. That was amazing. And on top, the dishes were just super delicious. They are all based on handed down traditional recipes, but have a modern, surprising twist. They have a small oven in the restaurant where they are baking fresh bread, so it's smelling also about bread. And I had a heavenly tagine with beef cooked for several hours with super, super soft eggplant and crispy fava beans. It was just wow. And I wish they might consider opening a sister resto in Paris. I would be a regular there.
Oh, transport me there now. It just sounds divine, the whole sort of ambiance and the taste. And I think in Marrakesh they do lighting so well, which always complements a meal.
They do,
Yes,
and it's
exactly.
just that amazing Parisian Marrakesh axis. Because I've met Olivier from Studio Co, and he's amazing, but he must do something in Paris. Because it sounds incredible. I mean, you can get a good tagine in Paris, it's got to be said, but that one sounds particularly amazing. And what about you, Gillian?
Well, we're travelling on Confect Corner today because I'm going to tell you about Uzbekistan. In fact, I could probably fill the whole show with my trip on Uzbekistan, but I'm going to focus on artisanal crafts and craftsmanship because, of course, Uzbekistan, the Central Asia centre of roots on the Silk Route, and for centuries have honed their crafts and their trades and their jewels. And the beautiful thing about Uzbekistan is quite regional specialties. So you'll have, like in Khiva, the desert area, you'll find like camel hair socks and winter hats and these extraordinary cloaks for men which are embroidered with silk linings. And that sort of really caters to the traditions of the cold desert winters. And then you go to somewhere like Bukhara, which really is this ancient walled city that is almost like a feel transported to the Merchant of Venice. It's really known for the caravans, which is their grand bazaars. And they have like 6 domed areas of the bazaar where they have their specialties. So there's the gold and the jewellery and the metal workers and the textiles and the carpet. So it really is an experiential journey and you feel lost in time. I was struck by the textiles, particularly in Uzbekistan, that they have the Suzanis, and these are from the old word Suzan, which is needlework in Farsi, working with the silk, because Uzbekistan is known for their silk. And these were part of the dowries sort of centuries ago, and they still have the tradition passed down through generations of embroidering the Suzanis. And the new ones, where the traditions still take on those the vibrant colours and the symbolism of pomegranates and fish and plants, but also some people specialise in the antique Suzanis, which are incredible. And there's this old merchant's mansion in the Jewish quarter where they specialise in antique Uzbek textiles and Suzanis. That's called Akbar House. I just couldn't get enough of discovering these pieces, and I wanted to fill a suitcase and have like a pop-up store in London, because it really is finding something new that is really an ode to craftsmanship and tradition.
Gosh, you're really evoking that sense of the texture, because it's interesting. I've experienced all this textiles, but kind of on the Silk Road. So I bought Suzanis in Syria and in Turkey, but
Isn't it special discovering them there?
I know, because they're the origin, and actually all the ikat often comes from Uzbekistan as well. So, wow, I bet your house is filled with them. Amazing
Well,
pieces.
it was near enough Christmas, so my suitcase was full, but they're mostly for Christmas presents, because it's just such a treat to go and handpick things for your family and friends. They're not going to find anywhere else. So I enjoyed for the first time Christmas shopping in Uzbekistan, from little scissors shaped in like storks and cashmere. Really a treat. What about you, Sophie?
I just got back from Milan very late last night, and I was doing so many busy meetings, but in the evening I went to this amazing spa, which is like just at the Porto Romana. It was an old port, so it was an old sort of like municipal transportation hub, which they turned into a hammam and a sauna and these outdoor pools. So you can lie under these 17th, 18th century Spanish-built walls and then bubble in these hot tubs. But it was so remarkable because it was just packed with these young Milanese, mainly couples who were kind of like milling around chatting. But there was all these different saunas. One, you could sit in the sauna and watch Visconti films, which is so sweet. So I was doing that, and everything about it was a bit quirky, but it was very restorative, because, you know, Milan for me is very busy, business-like. It's zipping from one meeting to another, and instead of going out for a long meal, which I usually do, I just went there. So now I think it might be my new kind of reset button whenever I go to Milan.
I don't associate Milan with sort of spa rituals, but trust you to search one out.
I know, this time of year, I think it's like survival for me, but this one was particularly lovely. I think just lying and steeping yourself in the history of a city through film. There's also a kind of amazing sense of the mist of Milan. They were talking about it in some of the blurb that you see as you go in. It's a very beautiful 19th century building, very elegant, kind of elevated space. But they were trying to kind of evoke the city, and it was very misty when we were in Milan. You could see when you were walking along the canals, it had this incredible atmosphere, which was captured by some of the great filmmakers. And it's the essence of the city is this kind of cloak of mist, and you're meant to be thinking about that as you're in there.
Marcella, I think we need to go there next time we're in Milan.
Yes, could be something after the fashion week.
The words art and technology might conjure notions of today's artificial, intelligently made paintings or virtual reality, but the intersection between the two has much deeper roots.
A new exhibition in collaboration with Gucci at London's Tate Modern, Electric Dreams, Art and Technology Before the Internet, explores this. Over 150 vintage tech artworks are brought together in an exciting explosion of light, colour and sound.
Val Ravaglia is curator of displays and international art at the Tate Modern. She sat down with Confect's Sophie Monaghan-Coombs to discuss the exhibition.
The exhibition covers several decades from just after the Second World War and the period in the 1950s where more and more artists took an interest in the possibilities that technology offered to artists, up until the very early 90s, but just before the internet became a kind of widespread domestic way of communicating between humans. So it offers a historical overview of a pre-internet period, but in particular, we wanted to bridge the kind of works that use technology for making artworks primarily move, or mathematical principles in order to generate certain geometric patterns, with the early interest in electronics and the nascent digital field, the nascent field of computing, that artists saw as a potential new tool for art making, and one that was so new that, artists themselves didn't quite know how to use it, how to access it, and what it could possibly offer. And so it's a period of intense experimentation with this kind of technologies, which also sets the tone for many of the conversations about, for example, generative arts that are still happening today.
As you say, it's this very exciting time when artists are experimenting lots with different types of technologies in lots of different ways. And one of the things I was really interested to think about when I was at the exhibition was how artists are kind of reclaiming these technologies, because at the time, the development of them is being driven by corporations and also by militaries around the world. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that sort of wider context.
Yes, so it was one of the reasons for starting the period for the exhibition just after the Second World War, which is not to say that there weren't experiments with technology before, but the period of the Second World War really put an emphasis on the destructive potential of technologies. And no artist that adopted technological tools after 1945 could ignore what had happened before, could ignore how science and technology had contributed to the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki or the Holocaust. The conversation about technology, particularly immediately in the post-war period, was very much about one of cautionary tone, in a way that is not that dissimilar to the cautionary tone that we have now about automation and artificial intelligence. Of course, different because of the historical context out of which those conversations arise. But I think that there is a bit of a myth with this period of time, with the post-war period, that the attitude that artists took to using technological tools was an unbridled, optimistic one. It probably comes across that way from today's perspective, because the kind of works that are created by many of these artists look like playful, surface level sometimes ways of adopting and utilizing technologies. But if you read what the artists were writing and saying about the intent behind their way of approaching technology, it really was a way to reclaim it from its destructive and utilitarian purposes, and a way for artists and creatives in general to have a seat at the table, to be able to say something about the uses of technology and steer them towards more humanistic purposes and creative uses. And so it certainly was a period that saw a certain type of optimism, but not because there was a lack of critical approach to how to use technologies. It's more because there was a thinking that it was possible for artists to insert themselves in that conversation and steer it.
You mentioned earlier a lot of these exhibits are very playful. They use light, sound, some of them are interactive and you can actually kind of pick up and engage with physically. I wonder if you could pick one example that you think is particularly engaging or that kind of shows a real use of technology in quite an interesting way. Maybe it's your favorite exhibit or one that you think just really shows what you're trying to explore with this exhibition.
The first that comes to mind is the Cruz Diaz installation, Chrome Interferent Environment, which is one of the largest works in the exhibition. It consists of a all-around projection hitting the walls and the floor of the room with patterns of colorful lines, but also black and white lines that move. Sometimes they stop, they overlap, and they represent the culmination of Carlos Cruz Diaz's interest in the effect that he called chrome interference, which comes from patterns moving, overlapping and moving above one another, creating chromatic effects that aren't actually part of the material. In this particular case, he wanted to expand his chrome interferent experiments to an entire environment so that visitors could not only feel involved in the perceptual aspect of the artwork, not only perceive the visual effect with their senses, which for artists that were working with this kind of patterns was already a way of making their works participatory to an extent. They really put an emphasis on the role that viewers' senses played. But in this case, really, the viewer becomes even a surface to be projected onto. And also, Cruz Diaz put some objects like plinths and balloons so that visitors could sit down playing with these white spheres that themselves then get projected onto and make the patterns even more dynamic, make the visitors feel like they were perceiving and becoming part of the all-over pattern. And it should be stressed that for many of the artists that were working at this time in this type of visual language to do with, the kind of art that is often described as op art or optical art. Really, their primary interest was to make the viewer feel activated.
And it's a real treat for the senses, that room you can just completely get lost in. I wanted to ask you as well about the links with other art forms. There's quite a lot of poetry in the exhibition and connections with the world of literature, and the Beat Generation in particular are drawn out. Could you talk a little bit about those links?
Well, I would start by pointing to Richard Brautigan's poem In the First Room, All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace, which is an interesting work to start the exhibition with because it presents this kind of utopian view on humans and animals and machines living together, and machines delivering humanities from the need to work. So a conversation that's very of this moment. However, part of the reason for me to select the document is its ambiguity, because for many critics, it's taken as face value as a very optimistic and naive take on the possibilities of technologies, whereas others interpret it as a satirical piece, essentially. And so I wanted visitors in the first room already to start off with this ambiguity of the ways that the artists in the exhibition approach the subject.
That was the Tate Modern's Val Ravalia in conversation with Sophie Monaghan-Coombs.
Electric Dreams, Art and Technology Before the Internet is open now and will run until June 2025. This is Confect Corner. Next, we head to the ski slopes to catch up with the Norwegian Alpine ski team and the company behind their clothes, Helly Hansen.
For more than 140 years, Helly Hansen has developed clothes for the most demanding conditions, from sailing to skiing and even workwear. As the official clothing partner of the National Alpine ski team, the company works closely with the athletes to create gear that guarantees comfort, warmth and speed.
Confect's Elna Nikanen Anderson met one of the team's stars, Atle Lee McGrath, and partnership manager Christine Jensen during the World Cup race in Finnish Levi to talk about the importance of layering, durability and pockets. But also personal style, something that's increasingly important for athletes.
The World Alpine Ski Cup is considered the pinnacle of the alpine ski sport. A chance for top skiers to showcase their skills on a global arena, hurtling down some of the world's most iconic ski slopes at 120 kilometers an hour. But for all the glory, it also requires a lot of physical and mental strength. Being at your best despite extensive travel across continents, demanding weather conditions and a rigorous schedule is easier said than done. To perform well, athletes rely on high-quality gear tailored to their specific needs. While the skis, boots and bindings probably matter most, clothing doesn't come far behind. And as Atle Lee McGrath, one of the stars in the Norwegian national alpine ski team, explains, there's a lot to consider.
So first we have the base layer, which is what's right on your body. We have two different types. We have like wool and then some more technical material, which is for warmer weather. But I tend to normally always use wool because it's really nice and warm and regulates well, and then it also doesn't smell as bad when we use it and sweat a lot every day. Then of course we have the speed suit on, which is for races and training. And then on top of that, either shorts or pants. We'll have nice pants that open up they have zippers that go all the way up to your hip so that you can take them off without taking your ski boots off, which is very important for us. And then on the upper body, we have a lot of different jackets. We have a thin jacket, which can be used for warmer weather or even as like an extra layer underneath. And then we have 3 types of thicker jackets. One that's like more waterproof, and then one normal down jacket, and then one down jacket that's also goes all the way down past your knees, which they call the penguin jacket.
With all those layers, no wonder that a lot of work goes into developing perfect garments for the athletes. To do this, the Norwegian outdoor brand Helly Hansen, who is the official clothing partner of the Norwegian but also the Canadian Alpine ski team, gathers insights from the skiers on a regular basis. Sometimes the teams visit the company's headquarters in Oslo, and other times they may send snapshots of torn ski pants or other details to suggest improvements. For the company, this partnership provides invaluable insights.
We work with them quite closely. I travel to different events to see how they dress. The order that we place every year, is that fulfilling to their needs? Or do they have different ideas that could help us to develop new gears for the future? We try to set up different meetings with our designers, developers, and pattern makers to measure the athletes, to see if our standard, for example, medium women's size, if we need to do adjustments when it comes to how a sporty body looks with muscles and stuff like that. And also their safety equipment, so that we know that they will have room, for example, in their jackets to make sure that they could have a back protector. For example, yes, with the jacket, we added in a zipper in the back to make sure that when they had their back protector on, they will have room in their jacket. And also, we got some feedback when it comes to arm guards that they often use in, for example, giant slalom, that in the beginning of this partnership, the jacket was too tight around the arms. So then we added zippers to the sleeves so that if they open that, they will be able to easier take on and off their jackets without removing their safety equipment.
Helly Hansen's work with top professionals in challenging environments also benefits the regular consumer, as innovations eventually find their way to the retail collections as well. During its history, the company has pioneered numerous innovations. Over 140 years ago, it introduced the first waterproof fabrics in the world, an innovation by the company's founder, sea captain Helly Hansen. Other milestones include the development of the fleece fabric in the 1960s and technical base layers in the 1970s. In the 80s, Helly Hansen introduced the 3-layer system, an industry-first program educating people on how to dress for the cold outdoors, a principle that's still largely unchanged. You start with a base layer to transport moisture away from your skin, made from wool or a technical material, followed by an insulating mid-layer, such as fleece, and an outer shell layer for protection. Today, the company provides gear for athletes, but also professionals such as mountain rescuers. Its uniforms are worn by more than 55,000 people at 200 ski resorts and mountain guiding operations globally.
I would say for us as a company, it's really important that we work with the professionals. That is what we want to be perceived as a company, that we are trusted by the professionals. So their insights give us ideas like the life pocket. That was from a Canadian coach back in the day. that made sure that the cell phones would have battery that lasted longer. A Canadian coach came to us and said, I'm often in the hill for, 8 hours. And my cell phone battery, it dies really easily. So could you guys figure something out? And then we made the Life Pocket.
Extra pockets, we really like having a lot of pockets.
Pockets are so important.
Exactly, and a lot of ski jackets don't have a lot of pockets. And I think our jacket has we have probably 10 pockets in our jacket, and they all have different uses. And you have lift pass pockets and everything. It's very practical.
We are looking at the fashion scene and trying to adapt the colors firstly, and then also looking at the design. For example, now trying these cargo pants that are really fashion forward these days, trying to make that into ski pants, but still that it's something that could work outside when it's cold and in a tougher environment, but also stronger feminine with details and broader shoulders, but also cut line that emphasize a feminine figure. We know that we need to give the athletes gear that gives them confidence so they don't have to think about or worry that something will go wrong out there, that they can solely focus on their skiing and getting better at that. So we often or try to at least 2 times a year invite the athletes in to discuss future designs on colors, on cuts or small details that could be a bit more fashion forward than a normal sporting jacket, I would say.
It's really fun that we're allowed to come with feedback on both parts when it comes to the fashion and also the functionality. I would say functionality is normally the most important for us, but then the fashion piece it's really important that we feel good and look good, and then also that we can represent our nation, our nationality. I think that's a big part of the of how the fashion way we go. We like having true Norwegian colors. We have some very cool Norwegian patterns, like on our speed suit now it's white with red and blue details, which is the Norwegian flag, red, white and blue, and then we also have small subtle details from our national clothing, which is called a bunad. It's like the national dress for everyone, and we have these details in our speed suits, which is really cool. And there are a lot of things, a lot of small things that we can, the fashion-wise, that I think Helly Hansen does really well. And we have Norwegian mountains on the inside of our jackets, and all these, a gold medal hanging on the inside right above your heart.
A report there by Elna Nakanen Anderson in Finland. Marcella, there are so many different Alpine fashion labels. What makes them work, and what are some of your favourites?
The Alpine sportswear labels have to work, first of all. And this means a perfect fit for you, and that's a personal thing, and then a thought-through functionality. You have really to discover and touch and try it on to feel if it's the right thing for you. And then comes style, and this is usually a bit more difficult. To find a balance between functionality and style requires really research and trying on. Quite a time-consuming thing, but I think it's worth, because usually you don't replace your ski clothes every year. Loro Piana just launched a beautiful ski capsule collection, and K-Juice is a Swiss expert sports label that has excellent ski wear. But go first to the mountains and find there your right stuff, I recommend.
I love the Loro Piana collections. And actually Monocle have just launched finally some ski wear, because actually up until now it's been a bit of an après-ski brand. So I think it's interesting, you really need to be serious in a sense with what you're going to wear if you're going to be properly skiing, because it's kind of a life or death situation.
Exactly.
I do adore being in the mountains, and I just love being high up, but I hate being cold. So I will take warmth over style, but it is nice to be stylish as well. But being the Canadian in me, I quite like going to something a bit more practical and Canadian. And I think Canadians do cold well. Arc'teryx, I think, is just one of those brands that is practical, but they really know their cold weather, and so it's really functional. And so I really am a champion of Arc'teryx label. But you're the stylish one in the mountains, Sophie. How can we incorporate Alpine fashion into our everyday lives?
Well, I think, as you say, it's miserable being cold, so it's good to take the tenets of Alpine dressing to the city, especially London, when it gets very nippy. So I think bringing merino layers into your look can be really useful, and it's lovely just to make sure that you can kind of go in and out of hot rooms, because merino breathes so well. And also loden, which is obviously from the Alps and mountains, and it's almost waterproof and breathable. I think of a loden gilet or a loden jacket. It's just the perfect kind of buffer to make sure you don't get too chilly when you're in the urban landscape.
Or too hot when you're inside working or shopping or just going to a museum. It's that lovely mix that you can do indoor, outdoor stylishly.
Totally. And I don't like anything rustly, so I can't wear padded jackets. And Andrew Tuck upstairs at Monocle is always laughing at me when it gets really cold, because I still can't really wear them. I don't like the sense of like that when you move your arm, you can sort of feel it. So I'm always a bit more in the kind of Sir Edmund Mallory sort of school of Alpine dressing, where I wear tweed.
I think though soft and cosy is good, Sophie.
Yeah, soft and resilient. I mean, if you can climb Everest in tweed, then you should be able to just walk around London in December, January in a nice tweed jacket. So that's what I'm doing. Now, the Turkish singer Melike Sahin has just released her next album, Akor, and it looks set to propel her to international stardom.
Confex correspondent Hannah Lucinda Smith met Melike at her home in Istanbul, where she talked about her influences and how she's preparing to bring her stage performance to London.
One singer's voice is defining Istanbul this autumn, that of Melike Sahin. Her ethereal vocals, iconic lyrics and diva-esque stage presence are propelling her to the forefront of Turkish pop's new wave. Sahin's first album, Merhem, produced a clutch of bona fide dance floor hits, as well as collaborations with Turkish rapper Gazapizm and singer Mabel Matiz. Her second album, Akor, is out this month. Sahin told me about her influences over tea in her house on a hill above the Bosphorus.
My main inspiration is not coming from music, I guess it's from literature. I like to read a lot, more than listening to music, to be honest. Yeah, literature gives me something else. Sometimes when I read, like let's say a novel, I see a word and that word inspires me and I start to write a new song, including that beautiful word. Alnımızın akıyla çıkalım bu geceden, geçelim kendimizden.
Akor was produced in Istanbul, London and New York and is dropping just as Turkish music and culture is having its own moment in the international spotlight. The BBC's Istanbul set police series, The Turkish Detective, has become an instant cult classic. And groups such as Alpine, the Turkish-Dutch Psy rock trio, are playing sell-out European tours. Akor blends Turkish sounds with choral backing vocals, drum and bass beats and stripped back production to produce a danceable, bingeable classic. Sahin worked with a cast of renowned international musicians in the studio, as well as producer Martin Terefe, who has worked with Coldplay among others.
Anla, abla, mahvolmuş aşktan. Şu ateşe bir bak, beni
studio with brilliant musicians like Dave Okumu, Sterling, Campbell, and it was a bit magical because it was the very first time for me that I listened to my demos recorded live in the studio. It was not the case for the other parts of my archive. I am there to control not only the music but the emotions, the dynamics of the song. I am much more into share my ideas about how to deliver the emotion that I wrote, that I want to emphasize. The recording process in London, also in New York and Istanbul, it was like easy peasy. It was like water, let's say.
Sahin will also play her first London show at Earth in Hackney. She is promising her audience a taste of Turkish stagecraft and the diverse beauty of modern Turkish music.
I am imagining myself as a listener who is trying to discover new music from Turkey. I would definitely advise him or her to give a chance to this album.
For Monocle in Istanbul, I'm Hannah Lucinda Smith.
The singer Melike Sahin there in conversation with Confect's correspondent Hannah Lucinda Smith in Istanbul. And Melike's album Akor by Gulbaba Records in partnership with Daydreamer label is out now. And finally, one of winter's gifts is that it gives pause for thought, a moment in which we can slow down and collect ourselves. Even better if we're able to solo travel and fully absorb your surroundings. For this month's final thought, Confect's deputy editor Chiara Mella tells us about chasing waves in the winter sun.
I've never really been one for winter sun breaks. Going on holiday to somewhere warm while Europe gets chillier feels like cheating the system. Part of me always believed that we should yield and go along with the seasons, not resist them. And yet, when it came to booking flights for my latest trip, something inside me piped up. My fingers hit the delete key on Reykjavik and typed in Essaouira instead. This journey to coastal Morocco, I decided, would exist out of time. It would be a parenthesis in the year, an escapade in isolation from the natural cycle of things. It's easier to lean into that feeling when you're traveling on your own. Solitude affords us the privilege of building the reality we want to perceive, undisturbed by external reminders of everyday life. I've long been a proponent of solo travel and how it makes every situation, every encounter more intense. I know that I'm more receptive, attuned, and open to absorbing my surroundings when I don't have a buffer to distract me, an anchor to the familiarity of home. The solo setup also makes it easier to try parallel personalities on for size. Normally, I'm a rigorous researcher and planner, but in solitary ventures, I often ask for and follow recommendations on the fly. Determined to push even further into unexplored personas, I decided that this trip wouldn't just lead me to the souk and the narrow alleys of the Medina. I would pick up a board, head for the waves, and dive into the Atlantic. I'd see what it feels like to become a surfer for a week on the vast sandy expanse of Sidi Kouki Beach. The behavioural characteristics and demeanour of the picture book surfer are much stereotypes and sometimes gently mocked. Personality experiment or not, I knew that I would never be able to wholeheartedly adopt a good vibes only, go with the flow mentality. Anyway, as a clumsy beginner, I quickly came to realize that the reality of surfing is a lot more prosaic than I thought. Making your way into the water, headlong and steadfast as the breaking waves slap your face, is a test of stamina and determination. And yet, hugged by a skin-tight wetsuit, bobbing on a slippery longboard, it's impossible not to be tempted to see the whole experience as somewhat metaphorical. More than an exercise in acceptance and submission to the otherworldly power of nature, surfing struck me as a game of both patience and gumption, two qualities that real-life me could do with a lot more of. Much of the surfer's time in the ocean is spent waiting for a good wave, not getting carried away by the promise of a mediocre one. But the sport is also about knowing when to follow your gut, to act quickly and spring up on your feet. The more you hesitate before getting up, the greater the chance of losing momentum and balance. 3 days of lessons didn't make me a surfer in either skill or attitude, but I was afforded a sideways glimpse into the lifestyle. Chasing waves, like chasing the winter sun, felt like sidestepping the usual course of events, a subterfuge that you can choose to evoke after the fact or leave neatly tied up as a memory once you're back at home, diving under the duvet as the evenings draw in.
Confect's deputy editor Chiara Rumella there. Gillian, you also love a bit of winter sun. I know you head out to Mallorca occasionally. What makes winter sun chasing so special?
It's about not so much warmth, because sometimes winter sun is not all that hot or warm, but it's light. That gorgeous light of the sun, especially here in London, I find when it gets dark so early and stays dark early in the morning. I've just booked myself the first 2 weeks in January back in Mallorca, mostly just so that I can have the lightness, and it just lifts my whole spirits. I find I'm more productive, and I feel then it's special time sort of just for me when everyone's sort of suffering back home.
See, I save up my sun for spring, so then I've really hunkered in and I've cozied up, and then I kind of stick with the season rather than exiting, because then I find it hard to reintegrate. But Marcella, what about you? You're a fan of solo travel, but you've just come back from Morocco. You must be a bit of a winter sun seeker too.
Yeah, I must confess, it's like Gillian said, the light and the balmy temperature. And first of all, if you can spend all day outside, I love this. Breakfast under the sky and dinner with candlelights outside with maybe a sweater over the shoulders. This is for me heaven.
And do you like travelling solo? Because I think Chiara evokes this sense of the kind of soul traveller, the poetry and self-reflection you get when you're travelling alone.
Indeed, I love to travel solo. It's just a completely different thing than being in two or in a group. But I must say, not for a too long time. I've spent a couple of Indian summer days solo in the Hamptons, in Southampton and Montauk, and the days were almost too short, in contrast to the very long evenings in a small hotel room. I had 3 books with me and I read them all.
Well,
and you, Sophie?
I've got a big family, so I take them everywhere. And, I travel a lot for work, and I really enjoy dining alone and just maybe with a book, maybe not, just kind of like looking around me and taking things in and being that observer, because I think you really do, and Chiara says in the essay, you really do attune to your environment, and you take things in and you engage with people because you feel like you're not filtering and trying to entertain your travel party or just supervise 3 quite outrageous children. So I think it's really lovely, but not necessarily always on my agenda at the moment. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Confect Corner. My thanks to Marcella Palick in Zurich and Gillian Tobias for joining me here in London. Confect Corner is produced and edited by Carlotta Ribello and Steph Chungu. Remember to pick up your copy of the winter issue of Confect magazine, which is on all good newsstands now. Until next time, from me, Sophie Grove, goodbye and thanks for listening.